Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Premier League Review. And this has been the first week where we're having to double up and do back-to-back weeks in one episode. I got sick at a wedding. This is what happens when you leave the house in the modern era and interact with family and friends. You get ill. That's just what happens now. So I had a few days where I've just been sort of laid up, not doing much, just writing. So I did miss last week's, but we're going to double up today, and we'll do it in a slightly different format. What we're going to do is we'll talk about the clubs individually and their 2 weeks of games and kind of what it means within the context of the season. And I got to start with Manchester United. They had an unbelievably embarrassing 16th of September where they were schooled by Brighton at Old Trafford. Brighton won 3-1, but that really doesn't tell the full story. I mean, you probably saw on your social media timelines, you probably saw all the comparisons about, which team cost what money and who'd spent what. And it's got to be said, Manchester United have spent a lot of money to really not look very much further forward. And I'm starting to think of Ten Hag's first season in charge as actually a massive overperformance. For those who remember, when I did my original prediction, I did say I could see Manchester United being as low as 8th in the league, maybe 9th. They've got a very poor squad. They had internal problems with the Maguire-Ronaldo issue and players that just aren't fit to wear the United shirt, frankly. I've got a lot of respect for the club. I remember the Ferguson years, and if you lived through those years, you would have absolutely hated them, like most football fans in the UK. Fergie time was a real thing and all of that. But at the end of the day, the players that wore the shirts, you didn't get in that team unless you fucking gave it your all. And they did, and they created so many Premier League legends, including, of course, obviously, that golden generation of young talent that came through their academy. But now I see players that I really question their commitment to the cause and just their overall quality, and I don't think it's ever been brought into sharp focus like this game. I'm talking Brighton going to Old Trafford with a team that was assembled for £16 million. There's, a ton of free transfers in there and whatnot. And they played United off the park. They had the majority of possession at Old Trafford. There were phases of play where United simply could not get the ball. And you don't say that a lot about teams going to Old Trafford. And you certainly don't say it about teams, like Brighton, where historically, Brighton were one of those clubs where when they were promoted to the Premier League, everyone was like, well, this is as good as it's going to get. Now they're in Europe. Yeah, I know the defeat to Ajax Athens was a bit of cold water splash to the face, but they're one of the best run clubs in the world. I've said that many, many times. It's really hurt Potter's legacy that Brighton are this good under De Zerbi, maybe even better than they were under Potter, honestly, because they've also sold some big names. And this performance was it just shows the gulf between where United are and where the expectation is for them. I'll focus mostly on United here, but yeah, there were just some really, really staggeringly poor performances. And I don't know where to even begin in terms of pointing the fingers. I thought for sure when Højlund got into the team it would be transformative, and I think he's had a decent start to his United career, but now the shape they're taking on with Rashford kind of playing more as a striker that drifts out into the channels really seems to have dulled Rashford's game a little bit. And probably you can say a lot of United's success last season was predicated on Rashford in career best form. Was that just a streak, or is that a permanent reflection of the player? Remember, he nearly went to PSG, and now we've had a very kind of more typical Rashford this season. I still think he's one of United's best players, of course. The formation isn't set up to play to his strength. And then in this midfield, I mean, this is embarrassing because this is a midfield with Fernandes, McTominay, Casemiro and Eriksen. They were nowhere. I mean, they were abused by Gross, by Matoma, by Lallana, by Dahoud. It was ridiculous. They were chasing shadows, that midfield. And I remember saying on a previous episode, maybe McTominay can get into this team and do something. He nips at heels, but he just doesn't do anything when he gets the ball. He doesn't make quality runs off the ball. He's just a very ordinary, tenacious player, and unfortunately you've got Casemiro for that anyway. Casemiro and Fernandes are doing the shift. Gotta say, I think my take on Eriksen joining's kind of aged well. I know, again, last season I think he had the most assists in the team. I just don't think he's a very dynamic player, and with everything that happened to him, and it was never really his style anyway, I don't really see him as kind of like a great component of the Ten Hag system, whatever the Ten Hag system is. They've been super unlucky to lose Varane, it's got to be said, but suddenly you're talking about, Dallow's in the team and Lindelof's in the team. Don't think these players are great defenders. Losing Shaw as well has been a blow. They had Reguilon was playing, and then you add to that, and Onana's had a bit of a nightmare start. I know everybody was like, oh yeah, my goalkeeper, look, he's mugged off Harry Maguire, which, by the way, yeah, of course you should do that. I'd hate to be a goalkeeper with Harry Maguire in front of me. It's like a fucking nightmare. But at the end of the day, you then need to get it done, and he hasn't looked the same keeper in terms of just shot stopping, that he did in Italy. He's still distributing the ball well. He's still like one of the best passers in the team. That's the crazy thing, but he's not stopping enough shots, and they've shipped a lot of goals, and you really need a keeper that can make big shot stops when the defense is a little bit disjointed, because it's not you starting back four. While I agree, I think that, Ten Hag has got some issues. I also think, he's made a lot of these issues himself. They need to shit or get off the pot with Garnacho. Martial should be out of the club. Maguire hanging around like a phantom. There's been the disgraceful handling of the Sancho saga, which, yep, Sancho did it to himself. I think he's acted like a bit of a prat, especially when Ten Hag's an authoritarian. But all of this, along with some inexplicable substitutions that we've seen, it's got to be said that all of this is contributing to there being a negative atmosphere around the club. We've got the ongoing sale. The Glazers, are they going to be there? Are they not? And this is a very ordinary United. Maybe I was a little bit ahead of the curve. Maybe this is the season where they can't get Champions League football. I mean, I think it's a disaster for the club, particularly at a time when they want to sell. If they cannot get back in, back-to-back Champions Leagues, fourth is the best they can hope for where they're at right now. It's really sad. You want to talk about fallen giants? We've got all this off-the-field stuff with Anthony as well. 95 million. Signing, and you might have to drop him for optics also. He's been a bit of a bust, for just being truthful about it. It ain't great, and sure, unlucky with injuries, all of that, but at the end of the day, you're United, and you're meant to find a way. So you have this disastrous performance at home against Brighton, and then next week they're away to Burnley. You go, this is a gimme. Well, I watched this again, and because it was the late game. It was 30 minutes of Burnley just not being able to convert. I'm about to say something that will shock you. That the returning Johnny Evans, I'd just forgotten he existed. Just assumed he was just drifted away. He was the best player for United. I mean, masterclass defending, committed to the cause, played a great ball for Fernandez's nice volley. But Evans was way and above the best player for United. A little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, because obviously, Onana kept a clean sheet. This week was only a 1-0 win. I'll tell you the stats. 38% possession for Man United versus Burnley. And most people will come away, having watched that game, thinking, how did Burnley not get something out of that game? It's, really crazy. I don't know. I think United have real problems. I really do. And that's crazy, because this is meant to be the second season. Ten Hag, the best thing he could say after the Burnley game was that the team had spirit and they fought hard for the victory. If you're fighting hard against Burnley, who are everyone's hot favourites to go down, I don't know what to say. That can't be the standard that United set. that you scrap for those type of games. And even though this isn't a Champions League podcast, you really saw the gulf in. Don't let the 4-3 scoreline fool you. Against Bayern, it was men against boys. So I really don't know. I don't know where United go from here and what the future might look like. But real tough times to be a United fan, particularly with City looking, so good in the league, and Liverpool having a resurgence. Of course, Arsenal back in the hunt. Just really, really sad. I'll talk about Newcastle as well. 2 good weeks. They had a 1-0 win over Brentford. I thought, honestly, a little bit lucky to get the win. Brentford having a bit of a mare these last couple of weeks with some uncharacteristic flat performances, but I wouldn't be too worried if I was a Brentford fan. The big thing, the big question mark at the moment is, looks like Ivan Toney's going to leave Brentford is the big talking point right now. Apparently upset with how the whole thing was handled around his gambling offences, which I find mind-blowing, that he's come out with a chip on his shoulder when everybody knows the fucking rules and you just don't do it. And they deliberately delayed the investigation. Be pissed off at the FA that you didn't get your England call-up because Southgate's a little rat. That's fair enough. But being aggrieved with Brentford, like, the manager came out and backed you to the hilt. They ran with that bullshit. It was an addiction story, all of that stuff. So, whatever, man, to try and get you a lesser sentence. I think you've been back to the hilt there, but looks like he might be going to a bigger club. Arsenal have been sniffing around, which is fair. I mean, that might be a really solid pickup for them, and Ivan Toney can certainly play at the highest level. Suspended at the moment, and thank God, because Brentford have looked a little bit toothless without him, and that certainly played to Newcastle's strengths. Newcastle have had a bit of a, they had a bit of a wobble in the league. They hadn't got off to a great start. Eddie Howe made some questionable substitutions in games that were really, potentially costing Newcastle the ability to get some extra points before the Champions League game started. Again, won't talk too much about the Champions League, but did watch the Newcastle-Milan game where it was just fucking Hodor in Game of Thrones for Newcastle. They were just holding the door the whole time. I don't know how Milan didn't score. It's as simple as that. I mean, you will not see many teams play as bad as that in Europe and come away with a point. Since returning to the league, we obviously had a huge bounce back with the 8-0 that I'll talk about in a second. But this result, grinding out a result against Brentford at home, was absolutely crucial. And I've got to say, look, it wasn't clean. It wasn't like a really, good performance. We had to rely on a penalty. But I am really liking the way that we've finally got, in my opinion, a very good, modern attack. And it's mostly because of Anthony Gordon. I wasn't blown away when we signed him, but I think Anthony Gordon has definitely played his way into the hearts of Newcastle fans. Every time he gets the ball, he's making things happen. He's got end product now. His attitude looks to be good. There was little question marks about, was he getting along with Eddie Howe? Was he getting along with the squad? But he's been a difference maker these past few weeks for Newcastle, absolutely lethal down the left. And also, I'll say, look, the way that we're doing it we rotate Wilson and Isak, depending on how we're feeling. Isak's been brought on, funnily enough, into that left channel when we sub Gordon off, and Barnes has picked up an injury this week, so you're not going to see him so much. But Almiron comes in, and Almiron, obviously he can put in a shift still. He's still very good, just he's lost that purple patch of goal-scoring form he was in. One of the things in my brain, was that I never sort of gave Callum Wilson his due, honestly. And I think he's he's not going to go down as a great number 9, but he's certainly worth a number 9 on his back. He really works hard. He's been prolific. He stayed fit. He was always a big question mark for injuries, and, ice in his veins for this penalty, and leads the line. And so, very different prospect to Isak. When we play Wilson, we can be a bit more physical. We can put things into the mixer. We can put them in the box. When we have Isak, we're really looking to play balls through the defence and use Isak's running and movement to get in behind. So there's essentially 2 Newcastles depending on which front 3 we're going to go. I'll still say that Cher should not be in a Premier League club. Longstaff is a disgrace. I'm not having it. I don't care what anyone says. But Botman's come back from injury. The big Botman, it's Botman there. He's back. Byrne is back, obviously in there as well. Trippier, just pure quality, pure class. And our solid defence looks to be there. Back-to-back clean sheets. The 8-0 against Sheffield United, it's a freakish result. And I've got to say, I feel genuinely sorry for Sheffield United fans, because the Premier League's brutal sometimes, and it's just unforgiving, because when you're in those games, you just end up like, well, what else can we do? Every time Newcastle came forward in that game, we scored a goal. We scored a goal from set pieces. Trippier with a hat trick of assists. Shout out to your fantasy boys one time. I don't think Sheffield United are as bad as that. I'll remind people, by the way, that when Bournemouth had that 9-0 against Liverpool and they stayed up, it's not the end. The season is very, very long, and Sheffield United, the Blades are better than that for sure. I know they've got there is a gulf in quality and a gulf in class, but yeah, I feel like and Heckingbottom has found out the same as everyone else does. The refs are terrible in this league. The Premier League refs are garbage, and you won't get the big decisions if you're not a big club. It's as simple as that, and it's really sad. He definitely has been disproportionately affected already this season. Sheffield United could be the next Brighton and just have a run of really bad results. That has a negative impact. This 8-0, as I said, I don't want to criticise Sheffield United too much for it, but Newcastle, obviously, we're getting back to full strength. We needed a big performance from Bruno. I think we got that here. He was like the puppet master. We just were so efficient and clinical. The key component here isn't that we scored 8. It's that we scored 8 with 8 different goal scorers. That's what I mean. When Newcastle can attack, they're fantastic. But the problem is, not everyone is going to allow you to do that. I hope Eddie Howe sort of takes stock of this and has a look at these games, the two contrasting Newcastles, and makes a decision. Basically, okay, I know what my best team looks like now, and I know who's going to, do the work and who isn't. Because there's still a couple of players that just don't belong in a Premier League team for me at Newcastle, and there's no excuse. I think we got better players in the squad that should be playing. But, after an 8-0 win and firing up the table and 2 good weeks, Newcastle back in amongst it now, all smiles, and everyone's forgot about any criticism of Sir Eddie Howe for now. Chelsea's embarrassing seasons continues. When you're right, you're right. And I said Chelsea are going to have these ongoing problems because they haven't prioritised a world-class striker. And sure, they got unlucky with the injury to Nkunku, but they can't score goals. They just can't score goals. The team they've tried to build, which is meant to be full of creativity and, chance after chance after chance, maybe that's a compensatory measure that, look, we might not be clinical, but we'll get enough chances to put one away. But they're not even really that good a team. The players, again, that started in the first week's game against Bournemouth, which was a 0-0 draw. Imagine that, right? Bournemouth are just able to hold a team that cost $1 billion to assemble. When you look at the actual players that go out there on the park, it's like, what happened? Actually, where are all the players that you've bought? It's really weird. Caicedo's obviously out with a little bit of an injury as well. They have this midfield kind of almost like a triangle of Gallagher, Ugachukwu and Fernandez, and Mudryk wide left, Sterling wide right, supporting Jackson, who, by the way, what did I tell you about him? Remember, he nearly went to Bournemouth and the move broke down due to a injury, due to a hamstring problem. I don't think he's the guy to lead the line for Chelsea, and he has been guilty in these 2 games of missing a raft of chances. I know everyone was all high-fiving when he got up and running and opened his Chelsea account, but Drogba, he fucking ain't. I'm looking at this team, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, this is a mid-table team. I don't even understand how you can spend that much money and just... The problem is so staggeringly obvious, you know, and some of the choices are signing, like all that money for Mudryk. He's never played outside of the Ukraine. You know, you got to be certain about those types of things when you make that kind of signing, because the Prem is fast. In the Ukrainian league, you might even look good playing against some European teams. The Prem, the one thing it's got over every other league is the pace at which it is played. It's the fastest league in the world. There is no time. There is nowhere to hide on the pitch. It is pass and move constantly. Fitness levels got to be through the roof. Positional awareness got to be through the roof. To hack it in the Prem, you've got to have these attributes. And what I'm seeing from Mudryk, he just needs too much time on the ball. When he gets it, he can have some nice touches, but more often than not, he doesn't get it, and he's wasteful. I do not see what all the fuss is about. People were criticising Sterling. I don't get it. Think he's been one of the better players in this Pochettino era, and he at least has some sort of end product. He at least seems to be trying. This has just been so monumentally poor. They have possession, this team, but when they create chances, there's just nothing going their way at all. It just doesn't work. It's just a busted team. You know, 6 shots on target against Bournemouth, no goals. And then they follow that up the next week where they lose to Villa. Yeah, there was a red card here, and Villa are a struggling team right now because of the injuries they've had. They certainly are beatable by Chelsea at home, but no, Ollie Watkins gets his goal against 10-man Chelsea. You know, Caicedo was back for that one, but I don't know. Again, same problem. They create these chances. They have chance after chance after chance. They made Martinez look like Yashin, and they just can't fucking put the ball away. Like, it's actually insane to see the same problem week in, week out. You know, 15 shots, 7 of them are on target. Who's putting it in the back of the net? And there was a clip going around from this game, like one of the just a miss so horrifyingly embarrassing that I mean it's a confidence shatterer for Jackson. But I mean Jackson was like really poor in this game. I mean, like, not even just he missed a few chances poor, like staggeringly poor in this game. We're looking at a squad full of all these new names, and the best 2 players, Sterling and Thiago Silva. It's insane what's happened at Chelsea. I mean, it's one of the most, as I said, I'll say this every week until something changes, but this Todd Boehly era, it has been the most embarrassing period I've ever seen in a Premier League club's ownership, and I say that as a fan that lived through Mike Ashley era Newcastle. This is insane. Mike Ashley was a cheapskate who gave jobs to his fucking bum Cockney Mafia friends and ran the club into the ground, and we nearly got relegated and we nearly got sold for 80 million. You've got an owner at Chelsea who spent $1 billion and just wants every player that's linked with any other team in Europe ever. You've got a really top quality manager, not an elite level maybe. We'll see with Pochettino's career where that's going to go. One of the most highly sought after managers in Europe when it became clear he was going to leave PSG, and you will not let this guy cook. You know, I can't believe Pochettino doesn't see what I see. You just have to get a goal scorer somehow. You just needed to prioritize that. Why not swoop in for fucking Kane? Or just, I wouldn't have gone, but you know, something like that. That's what you needed. Make peace with Lukaku, maybe. He's not great, but he'll do. He can score goals in the Prem. None of the strikers you're picking right now can do that. You're relying on Jackson. It's just embarrassing. And yet Chelsea are on course for a real long season. You know, 14th after 6 games played, not scoring goals. One of the lowest goal-scoring teams in the league. Just dreadful. Like, it's absolutely dreadful. And Villa certainly needed a win. I mean, they've been super unlucky with injury. As I said, Watkins, it was his first goal of the season. He needs to get going again if they're going to do anything. I just don't even know what to say. Like, Chelsea just are all over the place. There's already talk about Reece James is going now as well. I mean, just this insane revolving door where no talent's going to get settled and you're going to keep buying players and nobody knows what the best team is. No, it doesn't matter anyway. It's academic. No one can score goals. And Pochettino, man, comes out post-match and he's like, we were the best team until we went down to 10 men. It's like, yeah, you've been the best team in terms of overall quality of play in a lot of your games. I mean, you should be. You are Chelsea. You have spent $1 billion. You have allegedly done your homework and brought in some of the best talent from around the world. But, you just compare that to, like, the recruitment of a Man City or, again, Brighton and what they're able to do and the players they've been able to activate. It is a cultural problem embedded in Chelsea. There is more to it than just Todd Boehly is spending money and there's a period where you're not going to have any cohesion, but eventually it's going to click. There might not be an eventually, guys. It's not on a long enough timescale everything's okay. It just doesn't work like that. Tell that to fucking Portsmouth. It just doesn't work like that. They've fired a coach this week at Chelsea. They are changing some of the backroom staff. I don't know. I think the rot is deeper than that. And I just think as long as you've got an owner that wants to play fantasy football, but for real, and has got the money to do it, and is always going to be this influence, this spectre, this fucking phantom at the club, Chelsea are going to have a hard time. And no manager's going to want to sign up for that. Tuchel must be pissing himself laughing. Every night before he goes to bed, he must just fucking scroll through the timeline of Chelsea hilarity and just think like, wow, I actually fucking wasn't. It was a blessing what happened to me. It's wild how far Chelsea have fallen. And we go from when you're right, to when you're wrong. We'll talk about Tottenham. Focused a lot on them last season, all their problems. Harry Kane transfer saga, which ended obviously with Kane leaving to go play in the Bundesliga with Bayern. And I didn't have high hopes for them. Postecoglou had come in. I love the guy. I think he is a breath of fresh air. Earnest kind of manager and just always says what he's thinking in that kind of, that Aussie way. Very refreshing, at a time when a lot of managers keep their cards close to their chest and also seems to understand the history and the culture of Tottenham and kind of how their fans feel about what they want from the club, and also plays a type of football you don't really see a lot of. Again, in the modern era. 2 weeks, 2 very different results, both of them really promising if you're a Tottenham fan, for different reasons. So we'll start on the 16th of September. Tottenham Hotspur looked like they were going to lose to Sheffield United. This was one of those, you can understand Sheffield United's frustration. Crazy decisions, red card at the end. And as I said, Heckingbottom has pretty much echoed my sentiments and said that the Premier League referees just aren't up to it. We've got some really poor refereeing decisions happening in these games, and they always seem to go along the same lines. If you're the lesser club, you don't get them. Putting that to one side, shelving it. This was the Tottenham tenacity that they're going to fight. They're going to fight for results. In the Conte era, one of the problems with Tottenham was when the chips were down, you would be looking at who's the character that's going to get you back into a game, who's going to take responsibility. And now, funnily enough, in the absence of sort of bigger names, what's happened is you've now got a team that everything runs through the center. It's really, like I say, old school direct football. And so you've got Sarr and Basuma, who Postecoglou has transformed those players. I mean, Basuma in particular has been a real standout this season in terms of where he was and where he's improved and got to. You add into that, Son is leading the line brilliantly in the absence of Kane. He looks like he's going to be on course for potentially a record-breaking season for himself. He will most likely get the most goals he's scored in a Tottenham shirt in a single sitting. And he is being supported by the kind of classic number 10 rather than a strike partner, which is Maddison. Boy, oh boy, it got to be a contender for signing in the season. 40 million, insane money, insane value. He's just been incredible value, involved in everything Tottenham do. This game looked like it was going to be a loss. They brought on Richarlison. Richarlison has been a bit of a bust at Tottenham. He said he wants to be involved in this team and, wants to get psychological help so he can deal with some of the pressures he's feeling. And fair enough, man. I'm never going to, mock a guy for saying I need some additional help to get my mind right. Everybody should feel comfortable talking about that stuff. He gets brought on in this game, like 90th minute, he comes on late. It's just something that we're going to throw him on and see what happens. In the end, gets a goal in the 98th minute and then sets up Kulishevsky for a winner in the 100th minute. And Richarlison's gone bonkers. The fans are going crazy. And, a headed goal from Richarlison. He was a big physical presence when he came on. Sheffield United really sort of struggled late in the game to kind of deal with that. And so, credit to Richarlison for coming on and doing that for the team. But you've got to say, Postecoglou understood that, we need a wild card now. We need to create chaos because we're going to lose. And I love that. I love when managers make bold decisions to change game states. That's very important, when you can't just keep relying on plan A. And a lot of managers, they have a tendency to do this. They believe in their own system so much, they don't want to adapt it. It's almost like an indictment of the self. Postecoglou, no fucking ego there. He's going to be like, okay, we're about to lose at home at Sheffield United. This would be bad. I'll go get that player who everyone says is a bust, who's been talking about how his mind isn't right and needs some help, and blah blah. And I'm going to throw him on, and we're going to lump the ball up to him. We're going to play beyond direct. We're going to try and get it in the mixer, and it worked. All smiles at the end for Big Ange, and he should certainly feel that way. It wasn't pretty, but it's winning football. That's how it's got to be done sometimes. You then get the North London derby coming along, and so Tottenham are away to Arsenal. It's one of those where, I know we're going to talk about Arsenal in a moment. Everyone's very much up on Arsenal, and they're going to be in the title hunt again this season. I got to be honest, I looked at this fixture, and I was like, this is when we're going to find out if Tottenham are for real this season. Because remember, I'm predicting them to finish 10th. I said Harry Kane's irreplaceable. I said they're not going to have goals in this team. So I've made a fool of myself. I've Rory Jennings myself. The reality is, having watched this game, I think Tottenham were the better team. I really just feel that the way the midfield is set up and the kind of Maddison in that, as I said, that classic number 10 role, I just think him and Son are going to be it's going to be as good a pair, almost as good a pairing. Maddison is doing for Son what Son used to do for Kane, and Son's proven he's good enough to do it. I mean, 2 goals here, 2 assists from Maddison. Son was the best player on the park. This was a game, even last season, but certainly in recent years, this was a game you sort of dreaded as a Tottenham fan. There was a real buoyant energy, oh, okay, Arsenal haven't looked great this season. We can do this. And again, I thought, look, you want to talk about who had good games here and who was kind of transformative. I really thought, he's going to say it. He's going to say it. I thought Rice was pretty absent in this game. I thought, actually, Basuma and Maddison, and obviously Kulishevsky, I thought they were all dominant forces, while Rice was kind of a little bit Sure, Odegaard, he has his moments, right? But I thought the Tottenham midfield was better, and I thought they edged it as the better team for me. They had more possession. I think they created maybe slightly more on shots on target. But just the bottom line is, it's the away team in the North London derby. Arsenal runners-up in the league last season. Tottenham, new manager, lose their iconic striker. They're not meant to be in this game, guys. It's Tottenham. They're not meant to be coming to Arsenal and doing this, but they did. And obviously, as I said, I don't know. I'm talking about Rice because we are gonna get to Arsenal next. I know he picked up a knock and had to go off in this game. I think he was off at half time, so maybe he wasn't right in the game, and that's going to be a blow. Obviously, Tottenham looked hungrier. They looked more dynamic. This direct style of play, I think Arsenal struggled with it a little bit. This really could have gone either way. So look, you start out as Tottenham manager and you get 6 games under your belt and you're in the top 4. I think Postecoglou has been fantastic. Just a breath of fresh air in the league, breath of fresh air at Tottenham, and he is showing a lot of faith in players that in the Conte era were consigned to the scrap heap. And they're getting it done. And they're not just getting it done. It's not like efficiency. They're performing. They're actually performing. And the Tottenham squad suddenly doesn't look all that bad. Because those players that weren't a factor under Conte are now staples in the team. It's bonkers. It really is bonkers how Postecoglou has turned things around. And I recant. I totally take back what I said. I think Tottenham are in the hunt for a top 4 spot. And okay, it might be a little bit reactive, but I'll show you my homework. Look, Chelsea, they got no chance. United, I don't think they've got a chance. I said Newcastle couldn't do it again right at the start. And so the other teams that you would think are in the hunt, well, suddenly we're talking about Villa. Suddenly we're talking about Brighton, right? Outside of the big, City and Liverpool and the people you would expect. So Tottenham are very much in the mix. Absolutely. And they shouldn't be in terms of just pure logic. But that's the great thing about football. Sometimes you just get made to look stupid because the unthinkable happens, So Tottenham, for me, definitely a team to watch right now. And they're actually a good team to watch. They're a good footballing team. They're exciting. Tottenham games are fun to watch. Things you just haven't been able to say for so long. And they're true. Meanwhile, over at their counterparts, Arsenal, things aren't all that they should be. So yeah, on to Arsenal, and they had a bit of a mixed bag across the 2 weeks. I think their 1-0 win over Everton is good within the context if you know Arsenal history and know that it's a bit of a bogey team for them down the years, including last season. And it just wasn't a stellar performance. It was lots of possession, lots of huffing and puffing, but they've really lacked a clinical and cutting edge so far this season, Arsenal. They've been very, possession heavy, but not very incisive. And it's kind of interesting. There's like a bit of a resurgence of like counter-attacking football coming back into the league with like West Ham, and obviously we've talked about Tottenham and their direct style. Arsenal were playing perfect football at periods of last season, building from the back, pressing. They really had it all. They could do everything you want from a modern team. Credible, individual performances, and the wheels really started to come off towards the end, including the tactical masterclass Pep put on against Arteta when Arsenal and Man City met. But this season, it's really hard to put my finger on it. They're sort of missing something. I will add, I think we're now all in agreement that Havertz wasn't it. So, again, all the people who were abusing me for that take, I don't think he's looked great at Arsenal at all. I'm sick of hearing about how he's a generational talent or how he was misused at Chelsea and all this other stuff. Fabio Vieira was selected, ahead of him, and Havertz has come on as a sub. But ultimately, they're lacking something. They've still got Martinelli and Saka, who are really, good at what they do. Some of the best wingers in the world. Saka in particular. Odegaard is fantastic. Rice, as I said, I feel personally he's overrated, but he does all the defensive groundwork you would need for a team that wants to go forward and attack. And obviously, Saliba's come back. We've stopped doing this weird thing now where Partey's coming at the right back and then stepping into mid, though that's over, thankfully. A little bit weird what's going on with the keepers. I'm sure you've seen this with Raya and Ramsdale have sort of been pit against each other, and I think this is just basically, we alluded to it a little bit towards the end of last season. Ramsdale had some high-profile mistakes. He's getting cover, because he plays for a London team, and one that's always been favoured by the media. Young lads, I get it, but for me, did make some mistakes. Did make some mistakes last season that weren't really talked about enough, in my opinion. And I think Arteta has seen that, and without wanting to make a big deal about it, he's just gone out, made a signing. I've no doubt in my mind Raya's going to be the one moving forward, even though Arteta keeps saying silly things like, I'm going to swap them. I'll tell you one thing that definitely doesn't work: rotational keepers. I can't think of a time it's ever worked in football's history. It doesn't seem a good idea. You want your keeper confident. You want your keeper in good, solid communication with your back four. You want them understanding the systems and the tactics and getting as much, play time as possible. So no, I don't think it's a good idea to be rotating them, and I think Raya will be the preferred guy moving forward. Anyway, the Everton game, really dull, and I think Nketiah's done a good job of leading the line, but they need to get Jesus back to where he was before his injury if they really want to make the most of the dominance in possession. I mean, they had 4 shots on target. And they had to rely on a substitute goal. I mean, fair enough, Trossard came on early, I think, because Martinelli picked up a knock, but he still had to rely on a goal that might not ordinarily have kind of been in the team to beat Everton 1-0. They managed 4 shots, just 4 shots on target from 75% possession in a game that was like freakishly one-sided as you were watching it. And then obviously with the Tottenham derby, as I already said, Tottenham just seemed to have a bit more pop, a bit more pep in their step, a bit more purpose. And Arsenal, it's not often Arsenal are going to not dominate possession. And sure, Declan Rice picking up a knock, going off at half time, definitely contributes towards that. But probably it's also worth just noting that once we get down into it, all the things we said last season about this squad remain the same. Martinelli's out, so they had to play Jesus and Nketiah, and they were playing Jesus on kind of the left in Martinelli's role. Well, you lose a lot without Martinelli. Vieira, for me, isn't good enough. He's not good enough for Arsenal. I don't see him as a Prem-level player. And even though he has some nice touches and he clearly has some flair and creativity, he's very lightweight, looks easy to knock off the ball. And, suddenly, with the knock to Rice and Jorginho coming on and Martinelli being out and Jesus having to play and Havertz not working out, so you're having to play Vieira, you start to see the limitations of the Arsenal squad, and it's no surprises that they have been talked about, a lot ahead of January in terms of making signings, and Ivan Toney's the big story at the time of recording this and stuff, because they still do need 1 or 2 pieces. They can't have... They've been really unlucky, sure, but they can't have these injuries coming in and affecting their chances of taking some fantastic players and potentially converting it into silverware. Because I'm not even going to talk about City on this episode. They've just been flawless. That's a real worry, because Arsenal were great and better when City had a wobble, and then they sort of threw it all away and choked the league. And you might never get another chance, particularly if you're already dropping points because you haven't got sufficient cover for key players. Now, look, no one has lost the title race in September, right? Like, it doesn't happen. But Arsenal certainly find themselves, here's the key indicators. You're behind Tottenham in the league, and you're behind Brighton. You've had a home game against Tottenham, you haven't won. You've struggled against lower opposition. They haven't looked great, and they've played teams in the lower half of the table. And so something has to kickstart their season, and soon. And I'm just a little bit worried for Arsenal now that they might not be the same force that they were, and particularly with, there's hungry teams in this league now that are gonna, Tottenham, Brighton, Villa, that are like gonna say, look, you're not gonna get it all your way. Newcastle as well, of course, in that, and West Ham are having a decidedly different season. I'll focus more on West Ham next time out, I think. So Arsenal, for me, definitely need to make some signings in January. I don't think they're going to get through another season. And if they don't make the right kind of signings, it could be big problems. Obviously, updates on Martinelli, that we keep an eye on that because that's huge for them. And of course, this Declan Rice foot injury. But in general, Arsenal, they should be there or thereabouts. But these injuries are proven very costly right now. And so the last team I guess I'll focus on, because this is probably going to run for about an hour, is going to be Liverpool. I haven't talked a lot about them because it was my sentiment that they'd not quite done enough in the summer for the rebuild that was on. And I think the biggest signing, honestly, was keeping Salah. There was a real chance he was going to go to Saudi on crazy, life-changing money. And Klopp had said repeatedly in the media that I wouldn't sell him, and I don't think the board will either. But you never know once money gets involved. And that would have been so destructive for the team, Klopp's mindset about the team, but also just the fact that he's been playing fucking well again. And they needed that so much at Liverpool because they're betting in new players in the midfield. And by the way, the midfield looks, totally transformed. Their week was fantastic. Well, both weeks, they've got back-to-back 3-1 wins. They beat Wolves away. You'd probably expect that. But, they were very, very dominant in that game, and goals where you don't usually see them. Gakpo was in amongst it. Robertson gets his as well. And then for the West Ham game, remember, West Ham were bouncing back, playing this counter-attacking style. Players kind of, Bowen was back. He was on the score sheet against Liverpool here. But, I mean, what they do now, it's the word is dynamic. Like, what they were lacking last season was the dynamism in midfield. It just wasn't there, and that was because they had an old, jaded midfield. Now, with Szoboszlai they brought in, and McAllister's been super unlucky. He must be thinking he's cursed because he's had some bullshit like red cards and all sorts of other stuff. But I mean, they are just dominating the midfield in these games against these lesser teams. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do. Now, they have to, because Nunez is in the team, and he is far from clinical. I mean, he's like your classic, if he gets 3 chances in a game, he might score 1 goal. I'm talking about cast iron, nailed on chances. And if he gets those, and this midfield right now is certainly creating that for him, that's fantastic because he'll score a goal. But the worry is what happens in those games where he gets 1 chance or 2 chances. Sure, Newcastle fans will be dreading seeing him again, but he doesn't always do that. He doesn't always go out and win you a game, and he's the future of the team. He's the one that they've put all the money in and all the faith in. And so him getting goals and getting his confidence and just, being able to sort of convert chances is super, super good. He picked up a goal here against West Ham where they were so much better. My only other observation with Liverpool, I think they're definitely back in with a shout of top 4 this season. And it should, and they're going to also have a say in which way the title goes. I don't think they can win it, but they're capable of beating Man City on their day, and that can make things interesting because there's only going to be a handful of games that settle the Prem this season. My only other worry has been at the back for Liverpool. It's not cost them in these types of games, but Van Dijk looks to be less reliable, I think is a nice way to put it. And Matip's been playing a bit, and he's not it for me. So I don't know. They really do need to keep teams on the back foot because I don't have confidence in that defence. What I will say is Alisson remains one of the best goalkeepers in the world. and he has dug them out of a number of holes at critical moments. Even in these games, he's making fantastic world-class saves. That can't continue. You can't rely on that. So definitely keep an eye on Liverpool's defence, but everything else is looking peaches and cream for them. Salah is back, one of the best players to play for Liverpool in the modern era, and spearheading a hungry attack that's scoring a lot of goals, playing really attractive football. So, as I said, with everything else that's been going on in the league, I think Liverpool should be rubbing their hands and feeling confident of a top four, potentially at the expense of, maybe even Chelsea and United. Who knows? But it's definitely on for them, second in the league after 6 games played. Anyway, as I said, I don't want to rabbit on too much about it. We'll be back to the usual format next time. It's just, as I say, everything's kind of been a bit, everything's coming thick and fast at the moment, as it does, and keeping up with a weekly review is like hard, because you have to do it you have to watch all the games on the Saturday, then you have to sit down on the Sunday and watch those 2 games, and then there's a game on the Monday, and all of a sudden, right, well, I'm recording those on Monday night usually, ready to go again, and it's the schedule can be a bit tough. But as always, to the handful of you that do listen to the Premier League content, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next week. Till then, take care.